Hello, and welcome to Weed and Grub.
Mike's got to flame someone on the internet real quick.
All the time. I want this podcast to be about us yelling at people that aren't in their room so they can't defend themselves.
Great. It's a whole new podcast.
All right, cool.
Ready?
Yeah, it's called Why Are You Angry? What up, Mary Jane?
How's it going, Mike?
Long time.
Yeah.
Long time. What's up, Danko?
What's up?
This is so rad, man.
Yes. It's so good to see you, and I don't know, just catch up because so much has happened in your life since the last time we chatted for the pod. First off, we'll just give us a little intro on who you are, so all of our listeners know again about.
Yeah, I'm Danny Danko. I was the senior cultivation editor at High Times for the last 18 years. And wrote a couple of books, The High Times Field Guide to Marijuana Strains and Cannabis, A Beginner's Guide to Growing Marijuana. And I host a podcast called Grow Bud Yourself.
That's such a good name, dude.
Yeah. And before that, it was I had a podcast called Free Weed from Danny Danko in conjunction with High Times. And this one is independent. And it's weekly. Every Thursday we come out with an episode, and I'm a big Weed and Grub fan as well. So, big fan of the pod, friend of the pod.
Thanks so much. It's been so fun to listen to Grow Bud Yourself and kind of catch up with some of the tales of your time at High Times and as a grower and a, cultivation guru, and also one of my favorite stories that I've heard was you talking with Kyle Cushman about coming across the George Washington Bridge just weeks after 9/11 with a trunk full of freshly harvested
dude
cannabis.
Yeah, that was
pretty wild times.
definitely wild, a bit stressful, but we managed to make it through the roadblocks and the checkpoints and everything else, and we probably left behind some wafting odors. But we managed to get that harvest home and had some helpful cannabis during a tough time, and here we are back in another tough time, and cannabis once again saves the day. It's been deemed essential, and it's pretty interesting where we're at right now.
What is it like in New York City right now in the cannabis scene?
I bet it's chill.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's super chill. There's no police sirens.
There's a lot of sirens for sure. I'm in Brooklyn, kind of in between a few different hospitals, and so we hear a lot of sirens. It's mellowed out a bit, in the last couple weeks. For a while there, it was just completely surreal to leave the house at all for any reason. But
would you leave now?
I haven't really left the house. Once in a while, my wife goes out, whether it be to the grocery store or to the pharmacy. But that's pretty much it. I go outside, on walks and things like that, just in the neighborhood. But really, people are mostly trying to avoid that. And, everybody's wearing masks for the most part. So it's a little different, I think, than the rest of the country in a way, because there's this, it seems like outside of New York, there's this argument that hey, I don't need to wear a mask, or let's make this political, But here, that's really not an option. I think from what we've seen, there's no hoax, there's no conspiracy, there's no nothing. There's just a virus that's killing people, and reasonable people are happy to wear a mask to protect themselves and others. I don't know how this became like this, political kind of thing, but there's not a lot of conspiracy types going around New York City, that's for sure, because we see what we see, and it's plainly obvious that what's going on, and how to mitigate it and fix it.
The brain twisting to believe that it's a government conspiracy to get us all to wear masks is so crazy, because Our High Times colleague Zena posted, I think today on Facebook, I just saw her write, like, do you really think that the government wants us to wear masks? Like, the biometrics for surveillance would mean that they would actually want us to not wear masks so they can check all of our faces. So, like, how are you twisting your brain to believe that?
The whole thing is crazy. I mean,
yeah.
They were going to put tracking chips in it. They have a tracking chip in you. You're tweeting from it right now.
Yeah.
They're tracking you. It's done. Like, that's ridiculous. And that, Bill Gates really cares about, like, tracking you. He's tracking you. Mm-hmm. He doesn't need, I don't know. It's actually kind of frustrating being here and seeing that, like, through social media in other places. I mean, I get it. It hasn't ravaged, where you are yet, or as bad, or whatever it might be, but it's coming. And, like, you might as well accept the fact that it's real and it exists because it's happening. And if anything, these numbers are underreported, to be honest. I mean, you can hear a siren right now. It's a dangerous thing, and I think people need to take it seriously. Luckily, we have cannabis to help get us through, and food. Food has been a major. Food's been a major part of it as well. So weed and grub, very essential.
Yeah, man. Donuts and dank and donuts.
Bong and a pancake.
Oh man. When did you start growing your own?
Wow. I guess it would be the early to mid 90s, basically. Kind of first started around college time, which was 90 to 94. That was kind of the first few closet grows and small kind of plant situations, and then,
Wait, can we stop right there?
Yep.
Like, growing in your closet in 94 sounds crazy to me because I've only been to grow houses, so I've only seen, like, Bach playing while big bright lights that you control, like, to look like different times of day hanging out on female plants, and the whole thing is, like, expensive as fuck and dialed in completely. So what does a grow in a closet look like in 1990?
It's kind of embarrassing to say, but it's not much. I mean, it's like, we were lucky if we could find a street light, to appropriate and convert into a grow light. We had one store out in Worcester at the time, Worms Way, where you could go and get some equipment. But for the most part, it was all pretty much rigged together out of whatever you could find. And, if we could get a quarter pound of bud out of it every 3 months or so, that was, like, huge, at that time. The quality of it was better than anything you could really buy. I mean, even on Dead Lot or Dead Tour or whatever, it was just amazing quality. And, it really did help a lot. But then when I moved to New York upon graduation from college, I had to step it up, and you had to go a little bigger than a closet. And so the grows got bigger and bigger in New York because that became more of like a way to survive and pay rent and things like that. This is all pre-High Times. And then, eventually got a job at Headcase, hemp baseball hat company, still growing all throughout that time. And then High Times, again around 2002 would be when I started working full time. And then little by little, the grows started shrinking because I had work and I had to travel and I had, so it's funny, it kind of expanded and got bigger and bigger and bigger and then started getting smaller and smaller as the grows that I was covering for the magazine got bigger and bigger, where I was visiting, we used to think, 8 lights or 16 lights was a huge, huge grow, and now, I mean, I see multiple 100 light grows, big, huge warehouse, 100,000 square feet type situations. And it's interesting just to see the size, grow and exponentially, the heat, the amount of HVAC systems that you need and all of that, on a professional level, going from a closet to a warehouse back down. And now, people are back down to their closets again or to like a grow tent. And
it's so crazy.
It is, it is crazy how, but that's, if there's one thing I've learned, that's that the quality suffers the bigger you go, the more the quality is going to suffer. So if you really want, AAA highest quality medicine, you really got to grow it yourself and you got to do it pretty much in small batches.
I was just speaking to a mutual friend of ours who was talking to me about when he started growing in Manhattan downtown in the 90s above a pizza place, and he used the exhaust of the pizza oven to hide the smell of his grow. Did you have to get super creative when you were growing?
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
hide the
when
smell?
when the grows got bigger, definitely you have to live in a more industrial kind of area. I remember, the Navy Yard and Bushwick and parts of Brooklyn that were much more on the industrial side of things. Were far better to grow in than residential areas because, you can have all the air filtration equipment in the world, but when you're harvesting pounds and pounds in a place like New York City, it's going to smell. Inevitably. Yeah. I've had situations where I've walked into the building and smelled my grow room from, a far away. And that's scary. That can be really scary because not only are you worried about like the police, you're also worried about other people, just robbing you or being aware of this illegal thing that you're doing. So, there was definitely a lot of stress and tension over that. But at the same time, you could get $6,000 for a pound back then from these delivery services. Damn. Or more in some cases. And so, it was lucrative.
That's straight up cash between you and somebody else going in your pocket?
What's that?
That's straight up cash going in your pocket? You could do a pound for $6,000?
Oh yeah, and if not more sometimes. I mean, if it was sour diesel, people were getting $8,000 for a pound of that. I mean, because the delivery services are selling it for 2 grams for $50, and which it's like a $850 ounce or more. So, and you've got these Wall Street types that are willing to pay ridiculous amounts to have that quality, and so yeah, in those days, late '90s, early 2000s. You could get away with prices like that. I mean, obviously times have changed and those prices have dropped substantially. But, after you factor in the cost of all the, the lighting and the air conditioning and the security and everything else, you could make a decent living.
I have so many friends who are like working for Uber and Lyft and Postmates and all these places where they like work 80 hours a week but are not considered full-time employees and don't get insurance, and they're living on tips, and nobody has money, and everybody's working for like 8% of like what they should be getting. And it's like, man, if I could just quit that and grow my own weed and then sell it to people on the low, like the time for that in this economy sounds pretty fucking good.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't have survived without it. I couldn't have lived in New York City, and I had jobs. You have to have a job anyway, just to have something to do and to tell people that you do. But I certainly could not have lived the lifestyle that I lived without growing and being part of the underground at the time. And then little by little sort of getting more political about things, going to the rallies, Boston Freedom Rally, Seattle Hemp Fest, Million Marijuana March here in New York, meeting Jack Herer and going over to the Amsterdam Cannabis Cup in the late 90s with Headcase really, blew my mind open, as far as what the possibilities were outside of just, financial, but, for healing and for the world and for everything. And so that made me more political, less inclined to only sort of try to profit from it, and more inclined to try to help free the plant, free the prisoners, fight for home grow, fight for legalization, social use, all that. I mean, that became more of a mission, and little by little, the job, the cover job that was there to sort of cover for what I was doing became the real gig, and the growing sort of fell by the wayside, and I got my kicks more visiting other people's grows, and so, but relieving that stress, living with that it was not easy. It's one of the things we rarely talk about when we talk about growing, is just the stress level, and you're in isolation like we are now. You don't want to leave the house, you don't want to meet people, because the first thing you're telling them is a lie. What do you do? Oh, I ship boxes at a t-shirt factory. I mean, yeah, technically it's true, but that's not why I'm able to spend all this money and do all these things. So there is a level of that as well, and so us as growers, we're prepared for social distancing and staying at home and binging on on TV shows. This is all very familiar to me.
Yeah. Thriving because you were prepared for it.
Trying to thrive.
Are you hearing from listeners who are starting to grow their own more because of the pandemic, who are more interested in starting their own plants?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, anecdotally, for sure. My book's been selling, which a lot of others haven't. So it's interesting that there's still a lot of interest in home grow. I think a lot of people are interested in growing their fruits and vegetables and herbs and things. And microgreens is a big one. I mean, microgreens you can grow in a week, 2 weeks. You can have a full, very nutritious tray of microgreens with very little work. It's just popping seeds. And as soon as the seeds pop open and they start growing, you have microgreens right there. And those are like, those are like vitamin pills. I mean, they're just chock full of nutrition and very simple, very easy to pull off. And you can do that in a grow room or a tent that you have your cannabis plants in. Just put a couple trays in there and you've got microgreens. If you got a little more time, you can do lettuce. You can do all kinds of stuff that just pulls off some of the pressure on our food system and really reduces that the level of shipping and production and all these things. I don't know. I do think there's a lot more interest in it. I'm hoping. That's what it seems like. I think people want to be in charge of their food supply at least a little bit.
Yeah. It's crazy that like Nicole Richie is, rapping about growing your own food.
I know. I saw her on Kimmel or Fallon or one of those shows, and I was like, wow, like she's really changed a lot because, from the Paris, party days to now, she's like, she's growing all her own, a lot of her own fruits and vegetables, and I think it's important that we make that cool. For a long time it's been like something old people, farming or gardening. It's like, it's not cool, but it is cool. It's such a cool thing. Like anyone who does it gets addicted to it very quickly. And, even if you just have a balcony, you can grow a lot in a small space. And I think people are coming to realize that you can do that with cannabis. You can do that with fruits and vegetables, and particularly microgreens, which I think, it's like a no-brainer. All you need is just a tray and some dirt and some seeds, and you can really have this amazing nutritious thing that you can just put on top of anything.
What's up with New York? I mean, you're there. Mary Jane and I, we have so many homies there. My friend just wrote on my Facebook wall this morning, like, what's up with New York? So do you have any insight?
New York is one of the unique cases of states where we can't really vote on referendums. The people don't really get to vote on things. We vote on our politicians, and our politicians vote on the referendums. So we don't get something like Prop 215 or all these other sort of things because if the public in New York voted, it would be legal 10 years ago. The polling shows that it's like 70 to 80% in support of legalization, full rec legalization in New York. But our politicians, particularly upstate, are just way behind, and they're also beholden to things like prison guard unions, which need a constant source of people from the city shipped upstate to fill these rooms and fuel this false economy where these used to be industrial cities that produced something, and now they just store people and get paid to store people, and it's scary. I mean, it really is, and how powerful those unions can be. I mean,
and these are private prisons you're talking
some
about.
Some are private,
right?
Some aren't private. So yeah, it doesn't really. I mean, the private ones are even worse than the state prisons and things, because the private ones are a business. All they care about is profit, and so each person is a widget that fills a room, and you if it costs $10 a day to feed them, let's find a way to make it cost $5. And so they're basically eating sawdust and cardboard and shit like that. I mean, it's insane how we treat our prisoners throughout the world, but particularly when it's a business, it's even worse. It's
yeah, you shook me with that, man, just now. Saying it's a place that stores people.
Yeah,
you just
and if there's no
you
people
shook
to
me up a
store,
little bit.
I say convert all those prisons to grow houses, and grow rooms. They already have that awful fluorescent lighting, you know,
It'd be
and those
amazing.
compartmentalized rooms and everything. It wouldn't be hard. And it's been done, actually. Damian Marley, I think, did it in California. So
Yeah, he did.
yeah. So, you know, to me, rather than, you know, complain about, you know, the prison guard unions are holding us back, let's give them something as an alternative to what they have, where they don't have to be worried about losing their jobs, because there's a ton of other jobs that are much more positive than just, you know, keeping an eye on people that you're storing.
That's fucking amazing. Convert all prison facilities into grow facilities, and all of those people will still have jobs and be producing something that is a needed, beneficial commodity.
Yeah. No, I mean,
Wild.
I think, and you know, Cuomo says he's going to do it this year. I mean, they're talking about it. We finally have a Democratic Senate and all of that. So we've been held.
They just missed voting it into the budget for this legislative session, correct?
Correct. Yeah. I think the virus or the pandemic or whatever has also, you know, played a role, because they set aside funds for that, and now those funds are being used to mitigate what's going on here with the virus. But you know, they see what's going on in other states. They're not immune to what's happening in Massachusetts. I mean, people are literally traveling from New York to Massachusetts to buy legal cannabis on a daily basis.
No shit.
So
Yeah.
you know, and now that they've opened up rec up there, you know, the whole East Coast is champing at the bit, actually, as I learned from you.
I see that you're wearing a Netta Brookline shirt. That's
right.
one of the first legal shops in Massachusetts, right?
Yes, in my hometown of Brookline, which I got to visit on the day that they went rec. I actually covered that for High Times. It was emotional for me, because the police were there, you know, directing traffic, and these are literally the same police who were not, you know, let's just say we weren't on the same page back in the day when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And now here they were, basically like helping, you know, mitigate the situation with traffic for people that were coming to buy legal cannabis, and you know, we were bringing them coffee and donuts and stuff, and it was like everything came full circle.
I read your book recently because I was writing, you know, a piece about home grow, and of course I had to, you know, talk to you about your book, and you're sort of like the person to go to for growers who want to learn how to do it right now. And I don't know, it's just pretty neat. Like, it seems like even though shit's weird, the future is pretty bright in many ways for cannabis and for you.
I hope so. I do. I mean, I do think that we're seeing a sea change. You know, we had this huge industry that popped up, and now people are getting shaken out of that industry. Like all other industries are suffering, but cannabis, it's not cell phones. This isn't widgets. This isn't something you get into to make a quick buck and jump out of. You know, I'm the people I know, the people I respect, they dedicate their life to it. There's nothing wrong with making money. There's nothing wrong with doing business, but you have to treat the plant with respect and act in an ethical manner. A lot of the business people in the industry come out of the underground, you know, the people who started the industry, and there's an ethics and a code that comes out of that as well, you know, because we're counting on each other to keep ourselves out of trouble. And so there's a level of, you know, I don't know, just the way that people do business, that
Just being cool.
that being cool, and just, you know, and people who aren't cool just sort of get pushed out. You know, it's not a violent thing. It's just like the word gets around, and like, you're not cool, and that's not going to work out. And, you know, I call it the hippie shun. You know, the circle just
The hippie shun.
the circle just sort of tightens up, and like, you're on the outside of the circle now, and, you know, it's not like anyone ever said anything or did anything, but you're just not part of it, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it, but I know it when I
hippie
know it when I
shun.
see it.
Yeah, the rising above. I mean, I think one of the things that really surprised me when I when I met you, and when I, started hanging out with the High Times folks, and then ultimately ended up working there, that there's a lot of beef in the weed world. And I was like, oh, I just had no idea, because from the outside looking in, it's this very, sort of peaceful ideals and very happy community. But there is actually a fair bit of conflict when you get into it.
Oh,
and so
yeah.
to rise above that is, taking a deep breath and walking away has got to be pretty important.
No, it can be very incestuous because it is, it was a small world. I can remember the first few times going over to Amsterdam, I call it marijuana fantasy camp. You get to meet all these people who you've read about, and you've learned about, and it's grown out their seeds and things like that. And now here they are right in front of you. And then you come to realize, oh man, there's a lot going on here. Like, this person hates that person, and they ripped them off, and you hear all these stories. One of the things I learned from my mentor Jorge was sometimes you just got to stay out of it. You know what I mean? Like, just because things change all the time, and loyalties and everything just changes. And if you're in it for the long haul, you got to be prepared to sometimes just say, hey, I that's not my business, or that's not my concern. And rise above, like you said.
Yeah.
Give him the old hippie SHUN. Fuck, man. I have 4 questions.
Uh-oh.
Sometimes I feel like with this podcast, we are like celebrating, learning, growing, but also there have been moments when I've been worried that we're preaching to the choir. And then we'll get a letter from someone where it's like, I started listening to your podcast and I have parents who are super against this, and they've come around to the other side, and through places like your podcast and like other folks who are out here just trying to amplify the signal, things are changing for the better. And it was kind of a relief to feel like, okay, cool, we're not all just standing in a circle yelling in each other's mouths. And so have you ever had that moment that you realized that what you were doing and what you were standing for and how you were living, did you see a direct change in people's perceptions of not only weed, but also where we should go with it?
Yeah, 100%. I've seen it, on a personal level. My family, my mom, who grew up in the Soviet Union, and was taught that all drugs are bad, and cannabis to her might as well have been heroin. And the fact that I was into it was awful, and I was ruining my life. Now, years later, she lives in Massachusetts, and she voted for legal cannabis. She, and then when I made the connection to her with hemp and cannabis, I think she realized, wait, what? This is what everyone's riled up about. And she tried it with me too. I mean, she smoked before and used topicals and things, and really is kind of what is the big deal? And to see her go from super duper anti, so much so that, I was basically kicked out of the house at 18. I was dealing out of the house. So to this day, she thinks, a pound of weed is like a dime bag, and everybody must just have a triple beam scale at their house, but to go from that to completely, understanding hey, this is just a way that people, use medicine and alter their reality slightly. She always says that she can't even feel it. Every time she smokes, her eyes will be bright red or almost shut, and she'll be totally what we would consider, for all intents and purposes, baked. But because in her mind, her expectation is, that she's going to be completely messed up somehow and unable to function, and so she never really says I can feel it. But just the fact that she's come around that far, and that her, what used to be her bank in her town of Brookline is now a thriving pot dispensary with lines out the door anytime they're open.
That's tight. That's so tight.
Yeah, seeing that on a personal level is huge. That. It's just not, and she just thinks that she gets a kick out of the book, and the fact that I teach people how to grow. Now it's funny, and it's whereas I think before there was a fear, of cannabis and of the laws against it. I think a lot of it has to do with the legalities, because once something is legal, suddenly everyone's on the bandwagon. Oh, cannabis, yeah, amazing. It's legal, it's free, it's this, it's that. So you see it on a micro level, me and my mom, and then on a larger macro level where, people are joking about it all the time on all the talk shows, and all, it's become, a given that, hey, marijuana, it's like, it's just a little punchline where, before it wasn't taken seriously, and if it was like demonized, whereas now it's just, it's part of the lexicon. It's just everyone smokes. I mean, that's the other thing that you learn over time, is that it's not this like small subset of people. It's actually like a huge amount of people, doctors and lawyers and politicians and people from all walks of life. So all these celebrity pot brands and stuff, it's hilarious to me, because it's like, yeah, of course,
Okay, question number 2. Do you mind, Mary Jane, if I just get through them all?
No.
Okay, cool. We keep talking about grow your own, and I feel like some people will want to grow just a banging Blue Dream because they love Blue Dream, and it's going to be a beautiful bud, and they're going to be happy forever. And other people are going to be like, I want a high CBD strain because I just want like a little like nip to the brain and to go on with my day. Can you home grow whatever you love the most and have some type of success with it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are seeds available of every variety that you would want, basically CBD, 4-to-1 CBD to THC ratio, whatever kind of ratio you want, it's out there. There's auto-flowering seeds, there's feminized seeds, there's regular seeds that can grow male or female plants, so even if you want to experiment with breeding, that's a possibility as well. But yeah, pretty much anything you could buy, you can grow for cheaper than it costs to buy. There's a learning curve, of course, and you're going to make mistakes and you're going to learn from them. And you might have to kill a whole harvest. I mean, that happens too. And it's the reality of the situation. If you get a pest infestation or mold or things like that, you just got to start over. And that happens, it's kind of like having a fish tank. It's like, oops, all the fish are floating at the top of the fish tank. I got to start over here. Something went wrong. So yeah, but the possibilities are endless. Pretty much whatever you want to grow, you can grow. So, sometimes it's harder to find those genetics than others. If there's like a clone only situation where it's only handed out amongst friends and things, that's a little harder to come by than, ordering seeds from some company in Spain or the UK and hoping for the best. But, the opportunities are endless, and the options of what you can grow are vast.
I'm growing my own, my first plant ever. I got an auto-flowering plant called an Easy Pot. Have you heard about this?
I haven't, but that's awesome. And autos are great because, you can plant in May and harvest in July, And
yeah, I'm stoked. It's sitting outside in the sun right now. It's from Humboldt. I can't remember the Humboldt Gardens, I think, is the grower, and it's Soulmate is the strain. And nice. Yeah, it's like they were like, it's like a chia.
Is like the brand?
Easy Pot.
Okay.
Yeah, it comes in a tomato cage, and like the soil is supposedly has everything it already needs, and it's sort of like a chia pet cannabis situation. So I'm just watering it every few days and watching it grow, and it's awesome.
That's awesome. That is great.
Yeah.
There's no feeling. Yeah. There's no greater feeling for me personally than like consuming something that you created from thin air. It's like modern day alchemy. You're just taking air and water and light and plant food, and you're creating medicine.
Okay, question number 3 is, let's say you can't get an auto-flowering plant like the one Mary Jane has. So what's the bare minimum somebody would need to get started if they don't really have a lot of money, and the investment should equal the time, and just in case the harvest goes bad and all of those things, what's the minimum somebody can have to try something like growing your own for the first time?
Right. I mean, the easiest thing you can do is get yourself a grow tent, right? Because there's these kits you buy, and they show up in a box, and it's a tent. One person can set it up, take it down. It's got a footprint of 3x3 or 4x4 foot space. It's got all the holes cut out for exhaust fans, and it's got the lights that come with it, and the hangers for the lights, which you want that to be done right as well. And these kits cost, anywhere between $500 and $1,000, typically, for pretty much everything you need, aside from the seeds, right? And I wouldn't recommend going with some crazy hydro system in the tent. Just get yourself some buckets, 5-gallon buckets like you'd get at Home Depot, fill them with Pro Mix or soilless mix, and grow in those hand watering with your nutrient solution or your plain water. And you can do that for, most people have, I shouldn't say most people, but a lot of people have room on a credit card where they could put $500 or $800 on the tent. And the first time you grow a couple of ounces or a quarter pound, it pays for the tent. And now you've still got the tent, you've still got the lights, and you've still got the equipment. So everything else is gravy, you know what I mean? You're just paying for the electricity, which is really minimal when you're talking about one light and a couple of fans. It's not it's like not even as much as a fridge, basically, as far as the electricity goes. And so it can be done quite cheaply. It's just, it's the amount of time you have to invest. You can't go away for 2 weeks. You can't, it is, it's a little more than a hobby. You kind of got to check it out every day and make sure you're not dealing with bugs or mold. You make sure you're not overwatering, overfeeding. But ultimately, it's not that hard to get into. Again, there's books, there's videos, there's podcasts out there that you can learn from. But ultimately, nothing is going to teach you.
All by you, dude.
Yeah, your books and your podcast.
And others. But nothing is going to teach you more than just experience and doing it yourself. But it can be done cheaply, like I said, under $1,000, and you could be supplying yourself with ounces of cannabis every 3 months into perpetuity. You'll have to replace a bulb here and there. You'll have to, get new seeds or whatever it might be. But it's pennies to the dollar compared to what you're going to spend buying it from your guy or from your gal or from the dispensary or wherever else, because they have way more overhead. And if you want to go real cheap, all you really need is just the light, and containers and seeds. If you don't want the whole tent situation and you want to grow like autos, you don't even really need a light tight kind of situation for that. So it's affordable. You just have to devote some time and energy as well. It's not going to just happen on its own.
Did you ever watch the show Atlanta?
Atlanta, yeah, I've seen a few episodes. I haven't binged it yet though. I love it. Donald Glover's amazing.
He's fucking amazing. There's one where him and Lakeith Stanfield go to a pawn shop to flip something, and instead Lakeith talks him into getting a samurai sword, because he's like, you'll make more money if you buy this samurai sword. And he's like, but I need money right now. And he's like, you'll make more if you get me this sword. So they get the sword, and then they trade it for a pit bull, and then they take the pit bull to a breeder, and then the breeder's like, this is a great pit bull, I'll pay you when the babies come. And they got half the money for the babies. And there was a whole moment where he was mad because he needed the money in that moment for a new phone, and they weren't going to get it. But then 2 months later, he got a check for $8,000 because of the pit bull babies. And it was just this long lesson of thinking long term and putting forth the effort now, knowing that the gifts at the end of it will be even stronger and more powerful and worth it than the short term. And you just made me think of that episode specifically when you're talking about how important it can be to grow your own for the first time and see what happens on the other side.
Yeah, and I think one of the main lessons to be learned there is patience. Just sometimes step back and let the plants grow. You can't always, overwatering, overfeeding. These are the biggest rookie mistakes. It's all in doing too much and expecting too much. Or, I always tell people, don't try to think of how much you're going to grow. Don't look at it in terms of I'm going to get a pound out of this, because you'll inevitably just be disappointed if you don't reach that. But what you really should be doing is just being patient and, letting the plants grow and doing, what you need to do to help them. But sometimes just stay out of it, don't meddle, let it happen organically and naturally. And I think it's the same with business deals. It's the same with a lot of things. Sometimes you just got to be patient
and be cool.
And be cool.
Yeah.
Right? Or you get the HIPPIE SHUN.
I love that so much. Do you have
I had a final question.
Yeah, cool.
Well, with you growing your own and you being the legend that you are in the space, not only for growing your own, but just having the palate, the knowledge, the breadth, and the principles, I don't know, man, you have a strong code. and it's good to see. So I guess my final of the 4 questions is, what is the one time that when you grew your own, you kind of held that nugget up to the light and it looked almost like Michael, what's the Sistine Chapel, where like God was touching one end of the bud and you were holding it between you and a divine being? Do you have that grow story where you knocked it out of the park?
I guess, yeah. I mean, certainly the first successful grow, when you're looking at just, stacks of jars that you filled with, bud that you grew, and the strain, and what went into it, and how much love and energy and joy you put into the production of it. I've definitely had some emotional moments, upon harvesting and smoking that first J, where everything's perfectly cured. But I've also had the opposite experience, where I've had disastrous grows and had situations where I had to shut down grow rooms in the middle of the night, because the fire inspector was coming the next day. And so, there's both sides to it. There is that, side we don't talk about of, the negativity. And, I've had to visit friends in jail that were cannabis growers, that were in, prison for that. And that, you have to weigh all of the triumphs and successes against those setbacks as well, and know that, like, it's not always going to be perfect and amazing, and that there's an ongoing fight that goes on, and when you've met like people who've been in jail and had parts of their life taken away, and all because of this plant, it can be just overwhelming sometimes to think that, like, all that injustice and misery also comes along with the joy that it brings us as well. So I don't know, that's the part I haven't written a book about that yet. I've written strains and I've written how to grow, but I haven't really written the trauma and the sort of negative aspects of prohibition that creeped in all those years and are still prevalent and a part of that life. I mean, people are still being denied organ transplants, for instance, because they're testing positive for cannabis. It's outrageous that people are still getting their homes raided, having their animals, murdered in front of their children. It's outrageous, and the amount of injustice out there. So, for every triumph, there is that, lingering idea that, like, we haven't won yet. There's still a long way to go. There's people locked up in Colorado, for instance. You know what I mean? Like here's a place where millions of dollars are being made in the legal cannabis industry, and yet there's prisoners in that same state that are in jail for nonviolent cannabis offense. And something's got to give. We need a federal change. We need cannabis to be treated the way it should be treated, and we need to do the testing on it, because we've only scratched the surface on the medical benefits. And I don't know if that's an answer to your question. Sometimes I don't know. Sometimes I can.
I mean, it's a more important answer than whatever my question was. I learned a lot from Mary Jane thanks to this podcast, and one of the things I learned is you can buy a whole chicken and you can put it in the oven, and then you can roast it, and then you can eat the chicken that night, crispy skin, and then you can take the rest of the chicken the next day and make beautiful chicken salad sandwiches, and then you can take the bones and you can make a stock, and then you've got you're just using every piece of everything. And as soon as I learned that if you can grow your own, it's not just about getting buds, but it's about what you can do with the trim, and it's about using every piece of the plant in different areas, and I kind of geeked out a bit. I got pretty fucking excited by learning all of that.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. The trim is amazing. Like, I can remember we used to throw it away. And when I went over to Amsterdam and learned about bubble bags and ice water hash and solventless extractions like that, I was almost mad, about all the trim that I had thrown away. I was like, man, I can't think of all the hash that I would have had if I had been smart about this. And yeah, you can make hash, you can make tinctures, you can make topicals, you can make edibles. There's so many things. And even now, I mean, people are using the stalks, like the actual plant stalks, to make packaging. Our friend Kyle Tracy, for instance, has a company called Restalk, Stalk, where they're taking basically what would be considered industrial refuse, from these big factory farms, not factory farms, but, large cannabis farms with all these cannabis stalks that they're not going to do anything with them. They're going to toss them, or they're going to compost them, or they're going to throw them away, whatever. But they're making packaging, and I think packaging is one of the main things, where the cannabis industry needs to step up and become more sustainable. We're using a lot of plastic. We're using a lot of single-use plastic for these pre-rolls and for these grams and eighths, and it's outrageous. It's crazy. And for us, we need as an industry to become more sustainable with things like packaging, with what we throw away. And it is amazing how much you can do with the plant. Even the roots, for instance, people are using the roots of the plant to make topical products. Even like we mentioned, eye drops and suppositories. I mean, the sky's the limit, right? For what you can do with distillates and isolates and things like that. And now we're discovering other cannabinoids, more what are called minor cannabinoids, THCA, THCV, CBN, that are having all these other effects. Appetite suppression, appetite increasing,
Wow, man.
Yeah, just amazing. CBN is a sedative. I mean, it's like a perfect nighttime. It's degraded THC. It's what happens if you let a plant go too long, and you get a more lethargic effect from it. But hey, if that helps someone with insomnia, then it's worth $1 billion alone. Just that one thing.
Yeah, as somebody who stayed up till 7 in the morning watching Top Chef, I could use a little CBN in my life.
And that's, it's one of the things of this, virus and the pandemic is, people are struggling with issues with sleep. There's going to be a long-term, post-traumatic effect to all of this that we have no idea about right now. I mean, we're still in the middle of it, but it's going to have an effect, just like the Spanish flu did in the 20s, and the things that happened after that were all informed by what people went through. Millions of people died. It had a huge effect, and we're dealing with that now. We had it with 9/11. We had it with Katrina. You have these moments where,
I think this one is more like the birds, though, than 9/11 and Katrina. Because with 9/11 and Katrina, it was it's isolated, and this is like you're not allowed to go outside because seagulls might attack you. Like, you just don't know. It's pretty intense.
Yeah, it's something brand new for us. I mean, it's definitely intense.
Yeah.
Man.
Well, I'm so glad to catch up with you, and I love listening to your podcast, Grow Bud Yourself. It's so good. I mean, you just have the most connected. You are the most connected. Your network is so incredible, and like the resources you can draw upon to have conversations with.
Yeah, he grew himself into a legend.
Yeah, it's just great. So, where can everyone find you?
Well, I'm on Twitter and Facebook as Danny Danko. I'm on Instagram as Danny Danko HT. GrowBudYourself.com. The podcast is on anywhere you listen to podcasts: iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, all of those. Please subscribe and sign up. We have a Patreon page as well, which is awesome. I believe you guys have one, right? I think I follow you guys there.
We're in the process.
Yeah. That's a great way to interact with your hardcore listeners. That actually
your Patreon's cool too, because you have a area that you can get your book through it, right?
Right. There's a tier. The $25 a month tier gets you a free copy of my book signed and shipped to your home. We do exclusive content there. Some video stuff. We're going to be doing a lot more audio stuff as well, where it'll be exclusive to people who are patrons on Patreon, and it's a great community. It's a great place to communicate with your fans and get questions and all that. So that's been fun as well. And I'm out there. The book is on Amazon. I sell it on eBay, actually undercutting Amazon, and you can get it signed if you want. If you buy it on eBay from me or from the Patreon page. I don't know if we're doing video, but there's the book.
Yeah, dope.
Absolutely.
I got both.
Cannabis,
of them,
the
actually.
Beginner's Guide to Growing Marijuana. It's such a good book. And the High Times Field Guide to Marijuana was one of my first gigs at High Times. I copy edited that.
That's awesome. That's right. Yeah.
That was
It's
one,
a little
one of my
dated at
first
this
jobs.
point. It's almost 10 years old, so the strains are a little older. I'd love to do an update with a lot of the newer strains that are out, have come out since then, because there's so many. I mean, every day there's new strains coming out and new hype out there. So.
Yeah. What can you leave us with what the most hype is for you right now? What you're most hyped up about?
Well, there's so much recently. I mean, there's obviously the runts. It was even trending. The Obama runts was trending yesterday.
What's the Obama runts? What are you saying?
Obama runts. Yeah, that was.
What is that?
It was a strain that was trending, I guess, a couple of days ago on Twitter. I don't know. I just noticed that it was there. I thought it was funny.
Oh man, if you want to check us out, we're at Weed and Grub on Instagram, wg@weedandgrub.com. Is there anything else?
No, I mean, thanks for hanging out, Danko. I can't wait to kick it in real life someday again.
That's gonna be amazing. And I wasn't joking. You are a living legend, so I'm not kidding when I say that.
I appreciate it for sure. That's awesome. I try to put the focus back onto the plant, but it is nice, to be acknowledged. And
Ooh, that's the hippie shine. How about that?
Nice.
love it.
Oh man, thanks for hanging out.
Thank you for having me.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.